Welcome to this episode of Kill the Cat, where we're discussing the Safdie brothers' 2019 film Uncut Gems, starring Adam Sandler. Both Kat and I agreed that this was one of the most stressful films we'd ever seen, and in this episode we want to look at why that is, and how to use some of the same techniques to stress out your audiences. Spoiler warnings ahead, but otherwise, enjoy the episode. Welcome back to Kill the Cat. Today we're talking about how to invoke stress in a movie.
Well, I found this movie super relaxing. Almost fell asleep. It was so relaxing.
I wanted to read to you from the YouTube comments section of the trailer for this movie. Holy shit. I feel like I need to watch a horror movie just to calm down. I really enjoyed this film. I'm never watching it again. So, how much anxiety is this going to give people? The director. Yes.
So, stressful movie. Let's talk a bit about where we were when we first saw this movie and what our experiences of it were.
I was told to watch this. I was told it was a really good movie from some people I know, and I was like, yeah, okay, I'll check it out. It was late one night. It was 10:30 or something, and I was like, I feel like watching a movie. So I put this one on, and by the end I was just like,
Yeah, I think, it was one of those ones, I don't think I actually knew what it was about going into it. Basically, I just heard, really good movie, snubbed for Oscars, Adam Sandler's, best performance, put it on. I've seen it twice, and both times I had to, pause in the middle and, leave the room and just breathe.
Yeah. I think this is, in different ways, a little bit reminiscent of watching The Platform. For me, just in the, constant state of stress and, what is happening? But yeah, whereas I think that one was quite intense and kept me guessing. This one is just, stressful in, a, why is this happening kind of way. I think one of the things I come back to as a filmmaker is, how, what emotion am I evoking in a scene and in a film? That should be your goal as a filmmaker, is to get to a stage where you are evoking emotion from your audience. If you can get people stressed and anxious and engaged for the whole film, that's a really successful film.
And also, this isn't a horror movie. This isn't a thriller. It's a little bit of a thriller.
Yeah.
But not your typical thriller.
No, it's not an action thriller.
Movie. Yeah, it's
a drama thriller.
I like that. Driller. The driller.
Yeah. So for those who haven't seen the movie, go watch the movie.
Yeah. Spoilers.
But it is about a man who owns a jewelry store, who is a gambling addict. He's in debt to a number of people. He has managed to get this really beautiful gem from Ethiopia, and he's basically trying to prep it for auction. A bunch of stuff happens. It's hard to summarize this movie in terms of plot because just a whole lot of plot happens. But basically things go from bad to worse in every conceivable way possible. And he makes bad choices that add to that.
Bad choices. So many bad choices.
But yeah, we wanted to kind of split this up into two. There's a technical side of things in terms of the sound design and cinematography that really work well for this movie. And then there's decisions they made in the story that benefited the movie in terms of building stress. So we're going to talk about story stuff first, and then we'll talk about technical stuff, and then we'll talk about a particular scene.
Yeah, so this script had 160 rewrites before it got made. I think that makes me almost more stressed out than the whole film does.
You're just imagining yourself having to write a script 160 times.
I think the most I've maybe hit is somewhere in the teens.
Yeah.
Maybe 20 or so. And that's a short film.
Yeah.
I think my first feature had 3 page one rewrites and then multiple edits.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine doing it 160 passes on the script. Part of that was casting. They kept casting different people in the film and then they changed that to suit the person. And I think they were talking about in all those different rewrites, they kept having new ideas that didn't always mesh together, but they keep both. So that was one of the reasons there's always people talking over each other. There's like multiple things happening in every single scene.
Yeah, and that's one of the big things of this film is that there are multiple conflicts at almost every point. One of the big things in terms of the dialogue is like people are talking over each other constantly. And you're just expected to be okay with that.
They don't explain anything. They don't introduce any characters. They don't slow down. The opening, so there's like Ethiopia and then there's like a colonoscopy and then it's just meeting all the people and it feels like one big scene.
Yeah.
And it's just go, go, go and the camera's tracking and everyone's talking and you're like, there's so much going on.
Even in the downtime moments, there are a few throughout the film, often when Howard's with his family, there is still conflict going on. But you've only got one or two conflicts.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's your downtime? Really? Like, with all these conflicts going on, setting up the stakes is really important for this film. And they do a really good job of setting them up early and maintaining them. So the opening scene kind of sets us up for like a life or death expectation because the opening scene is a guy, like a miner in Ethiopia, whose leg has broken and has got bones sticking out of it. We then go to New York and it's Howard being checked for cancer. And then we go from there to his jewelry store and Arno's men are there and they kind of like shake him up and take his watch. And we learn that he's in debt. And within 10 minutes, we've seen all this stuff happening and we've gotten a very clear sense that like this guy's a guy with a lot of shit going on.
I actually really like that opening scene in Ethiopia because it's chaos. Like it begins in chaos. There's a man, like you said, like a man with a leg broken and there's just like big crowds of people trying to save him and then two people slipping off to get this gem.
Yeah.
I think that's a really smart place to like start the movie, not with Howard, but with like a pure chaos scene. Also just knowing where like that gem has come from, that environment, I think that brings it with it.
Yeah.
Whenever you see it, you're like, oh, like death and blood went into getting this opal.
And more will likely follow it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I watched this with my wife and our housemate, and they didn't enjoy the movie, my wife especially. And one of the things she didn't enjoy about the movie was like Howard makes a lot of really dumb decisions, some really bad choices.
So dumb.
And that could be a disconnect point for you. And if you disconnect from the character at that point, you're probably not going to enjoy the movie. For me, I was like, okay, there's a point where you can kind of follow what he's trying to do. Like, he is a gambling addict, so you need to know that he does have a problem with money and he's just trying to hold people off until he can get his big break. Like, that's what he's looking for.
It's such a big delusion that he's going to get this big payday and you think it's going to come maybe from the opal. Yeah. He's making these dumb decisions, but like, you do kind of believe that payday is coming.
There's a scene towards the end of the movie where he talks with Kevin Grant and he's like when you are ahead in a basketball game, you don't win by 2 points and like, oh, that's it. Like, you want to win big. You go for as much as you can. And he's like, this is my game. Like, this is what I do. And so he's constantly trying to win it as big as he possibly can. You know, he could pay off Arno. Like, there's a scene where he has like the $165,000 in his hand. He could pay off the people outside his door and be done with so much of the conflict, but he's like, no, I'm gonna win big, and he bets it all on.
It's a really good example of like a protagonist that has really strong internal logic. You don't have to agree with it, but the logic is there. At no point did I feel like Howard was making these dumb decisions to like further the plot. Yeah. Or because the plot, I was like, no, I get your headspace. Yeah. It's a very stressful headspace for us, but we get it.
Yeah, we understand why he would do those things.
Oh, the bit where Keiji gives him the ring and he immediately pawns it. I was like, dude, no.
Why would you do that?
That's most of the movie, just going, Howard, no.
And it's interesting watching it through a second time because there's all this stuff you don't pick up. Like, on the first watch, like, you get to a point where you realize, like, Damani had been storing watches with Howard and Howard's given a few of them away. On the next watch through, no pun intended, you see him as he's giving those watches away and you're like, oh no, I know what that is now. I know who's that. Like, that's not yours to give away. Like, in the first, like, 15 or so minutes of the film. From the very beginning, you know, we're seeing him be roughed up. So stakes are there. And so it just adds to that, like, why are you doing this? Howard, don't. And that's not even to mention, like, the stakes that are set with his family. Like, we know he's got a girlfriend though he's married and has family, we know that he's going through a divorce. And so there's this kind of ever-present risk of not only is his money situation collapsing and kind of a lot of his identity and his work and all of that, but actually his emotional life is collapsing as well.
Yeah, there's no safe spaces.
No.
Anywhere. Like, he even goes to, like, his daughter's high school play and Arno's men are waiting for him in the audience. There's stress at home, there's stress at work. Even when he's on the street, he's always on the phone, or people on the street know him and are, like, after him. He doesn't get a break. There's nowhere for him to go.
No.
One of my favorite things about this movie is they're all about, like, debt and money and, like, big scores, but everything looks really tacky and everything looks really cheap.
Yeah.
Like Howard says his, like,
Furby thing.
Furby. Oh my God, the Furby. I remember that from the trailer.
So tacky.
And, like, even the Michael Jackson pendant, which is, like, a little subplot. Howard's store looks cheap. He says something about, like, his silk shirts, but, like, he looks cheap.
Yeah.
So I liked that contrast. And I also really like sometimes performances don't match at all. There's a scene where Howard tries to win Dinah back and he's saying these really sweet things and she's just laughing in his face throughout. And it's kind of that ongoing thing of, like, no one is really listening to each other. Ever. No one's on the same level. No one's living in the same world. So there's no communication.
Yeah. Damani says that at one point. He's like, yells at Howard. He's like, you're not listening to me. And that's this constant thing. And that comes back to, you know, all the voices talking over each other. We've all been in that situation where everyone's talking, no one's listening, and it's just conflict and no one comes out of there feeling good. And it just watching people go through that and watching Howard go through that for like 2.5 hours, it just brings up that anxiety in you and keeps it going.
And he, like, stays, I want to call it polite, but maybe, like, genial through most of it. Even when he's getting roughed up, he's acting very friendly towards them and, like, not trying to get them to calm down, but just kind of entering that cognitive dissonance of, like, this is okay. There's definitely exceptions to that, like when they're dangling him out the window. But if you go to look back at that car scene, like, he's still acting like it's just him and Arno in the car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or even when they, like, take his watch in the early scene, he's like, oh, what are you doing? What are you... yeah, okay. Well, then take that off the debt. And he's I think part of his character is like, he's this, maybe not a quick talker, but he talks a lot. And that's a lot of where his charisma is as a character. He
is charismatic. I think that's important. Like, we're talking about this guy with a gambling problem that makes a lot of, like, bad choices. But
he's also a salesman and a businessman, and
he's good at it.
And he's dealing with big money and big clients. Actually, to move into a more technical note, the talking over each other is really important to the sound design too. You'll notice in the film, there's just a lot of noise happening. There are scenes where, you know, you've got 3 people talking, there's a phone ringing, there's someone with a drill on the other side of the room, and it's just, you're never given this space to clear your head. The downtime is kind of the only time you get, and even then you're like, you know, it's usually time when Dina is around and they're conflicting, but it's a much more sort of passive-aggressive conflict.
Yeah, when you were describing it to me before and you're saying you're never quite sure where anything is coming from because of off-screen sounds, and I put down, that's really tapping into, like, your survival instinct. Because if you're hearing a lot of noise and if it's a lot of threatening noise, like a drill, you want to know where that's coming from.
Yeah.
And they're not showing it to you. It's that idea of, like, you hear a noise in the night. That's immediately threatening because you don't know where it's coming from. Yeah, you just feel, like, really threatened watching this film, I find.
Yeah.
Like, you're feeling it for Howard, but also for yourself. Like, you're on edge. It's tapping into something very primal.
Yeah. And I think that feeds into the cinematography of, like... So there's a few things I noted while watching. One of the things with this film is, like, they're almost always on sort of longer lenses. And they're in close-ups. So what that means is you get a slightly more claustrophobic sense. Like, you never see the environment as much because we're always tight and we're always trying to follow Howard, but usually struggling to follow him because he's representative of his state of mind where he's kind of frantic and just sort of keeping up with not what is everything that's going on, but what's the most immediate threat that's going on. But by using longer lenses and by hiding the surrounding environment from us, often we are left looking at Howard, seeing very little around him, but knowing there is more off screen that is threatening. That's really unsettling to watch. I mean, in terms of wider shots, like we don't really get many of them throughout the movie. And the ones we do get really come in the second half or in the quieter moments. We only see Howard's office for the first time in a wide shot after his fight with Julia when outside the club. Even then, like, it's almost unrecognizable because we've never seen the office in a wide shot. And so it wasn't until my second watch through that I was like, oh, that's where he is right now. On a practical note for you filmmakers, if you want to use this technique, one of the tricky things you're going to deal with is something called geography. So when films enter a new scene, typically what they'll do, they'll show you a wide shot that reveals the location. You can see what direction people are facing, where everyone is in relation to everyone else. And then from there, you move into your close-up shots because you already know where people are looking and who's looking at who and where everyone is. When you only have close-ups and mid-sized shots, you suddenly have the problem of, well, how do you set up the geography? Because you could do the wide shot of location, but that would take people out of the kind of tight claustrophobic feel and like give them a space to breathe. And that's not what you want when you're trying to do this movie. And so one of the things they did is they often reveal spaces by doing a walkthrough with Howard. So the first time we see him enter his jewelry shop, we see him walk down the hallway into the doors. We see him looking at the people there. We see him walk into the back office, talk to the jeweler who works out the back, the guy who like doesn't have any lines and is very calm in like all the chaos. And then we see him sit at his desk. We see that also when he goes into the auction house, we follow him in. When he goes to the pawnbrokers the first time, we don't follow him in, but we see a shot from really far away that shows a lot of the location. So if you're wanting to do stuff like that, it's really important to get the geography and the movie managers to do that. The last thing I would say for the cinematography is that it uses zoom instead of often what movies do is when they want to go closer to a character, they'll move the camera physically closer. So you use what's called a dolly. What that does is that brings us emotionally closer to a character, and that makes us feel, like when you want to support someone or when you're talking to someone about something deep, right? Like you might sit closer to them. What a zoom does is it stays the same distance away, but just closes off the background. And there's an effect called compression, which is an effect of like longer lenses. That gives us the effect of feeling a bit more closed in. And by doing that pretty often throughout the movie, whenever they want to get closer to Howard, they actually, rather than making us feel emotionally closer to him, they just make him feel like he is becoming more surrounded. We have less of a sense of what's going on in the outside of frame. And so by doing that, it feels more threatening to us. That's a very technical note, but hopefully helpful for cinematographers and directors. Like that's something important to keep in mind. As
opposed to the normal wide shot, mid shot, close up, cutaway approach.
That's an approach that works, but it's not an approach that works for this movie.
Yeah, no, I always felt like the camera was trying to keep up with Howard, and Howard's always on the move.
Yeah, he's always talking, he's always moving.
Yeah, not always. Like you said, there's downtime with his family.
Yeah.
There's the one where he's like in the cupboard, like texting his girlfriend.
Yeah.
And that's so quiet and it's one location.
Like that juxtaposition though of like, we go from this very noisy sort of film to this suddenly very quiet, intimate moment between the two of them.
And you need that, otherwise it just becomes overwhelming and you tune out if you don't give your audience a break.
Yeah, that's always the tricky balance in movies like this where you want to evoke an emotion for so long. It's like the life lesson. Why do we have the sad moments? Well, if we didn't have the sad times, the happy times wouldn't feel as good, right? But it's the same in this, right? If you don't have the downtime, the uptime doesn't feel as intense because, well, we've just been on that the whole time and we tune out from it eventually.
Yeah. Should we look at a scene?
Yeah.
All right, so this scene, it's approximately 1 hour into the movie. And I think it's just a perfect example of what Uncut Gems does so well. So we listed all the conflicts in this scene. There are 11 conflicts in like a 10-minute scene.
Yeah.
And it's not one after the other. They're all happening like at the same time.
Yeah. So do we want to describe the scene for people?
Yeah.
So the scene in question is the scene where Howard is on the phone to the auction house. Kevin Grant is coming by to drop the diamond off. He gives Howard the diamond and Howard tells him to go make a bet. There's a moment in the middle where Kevin Grant is like stuck in the doorway because there's like a double door system. People can only be buzzed into the shop, and that door stops working. There is also Damani in this scene realizes that Howard's been selling his watches or giving his watches away to people. Howard also gets a call from his doctor about the cancer results, which is like a positive result, but it comes in the middle of this like intense scene, and so it just doesn't, like, you don't have a time to celebrate it because he's being yelled at by people. It's quite an intense scene, and it ends with Howard and Julia arguing in the hallway.
He throws a smoothie at her, is that?
Yeah, she has a smoothie, and she's like, I was in a hurry, and he's like, yeah, you're right, you went and got a smoothie.
Yeah. I feel like we all know a Julia.
Yeah.
I felt like I knew that character.
Brilliantly played, though.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think performances in this movie are brilliant. So what are the conflicts we have in this scene?
Okay. Should I list them fast or should we take turns?
Let's take turns. Okay, so the initial one is Howard on the phone to the auction house is how we open the scene, trying to convince them to let the gem stay on auction. Then
he gets a call from KG's lawyers. So that's conflict number 2.
Then Julia is like calling on the other line while he's on the phone with Kevin Grant's lawyers.
So that's conflict number 3. Then KG himself arrives. So that's conflict number 4.
Yep. Then the door doesn't work. So Howard versus door is what we wrote for that conflict.
Conflict number 5.
Yeah. The guy who owned the Michael Jackson pendant that is pawned in like an early scene in the movie and is like this weird little subplot going on off the side. He arrives on the other door, like behind Kevin Grant, trying to get in.
That's number 6.
Then there's Kevin Grant actually in there giving the gem back, but Howard doesn't have Kevin Grant's ring to give back.
He pawned it. Oh my God. When he pawns the ring, you're like, no, Howard, stop. That's number 7? 7, yeah.
Yeah. And then there's Damani realizing while this is all happening that the watches have been sold.
Conflict number 8.
And he's yelling at Howard. Howard gets a call from his doctor.
Number 9.
Damani puts a bottle of something in the fish tank.
That's number 10 because now Howard has to save his fish.
Yeah. Howard then has another brief call with the auction house.
So that's number 11.
Yeah. And then Howard and Julia fight in the hallway to round off the scene. So that's 12. We got to 12.
12. Oh my gosh. Okay. And like that's all happening so fast and they do not give you any time. I mean, everyone there wants something.
Everyone wants something from Howard.
Yeah.
And we're in so many close-ups for this. Like we never really get a wide shot. We're always like tight in there with him as this happens.
The closest thing I could think of is being on the floor of a busy restaurant and there's like 100 things going on at once and every customer wants to feel like a priority.
Yeah.
And you can't. So that was the closest thing I can think to that. He's being attacked essentially by so many different parties with different energies and he's not really dealing with any of them.
Yeah, like he is juggling them and like dealing with the very most immediate thing, trying to talk his way out of that problem while the other problem is like yelling at him.
It's all problems he has caused.
Yeah.
Except for, look, the cancer isn't his fault.
No, and the cancer is the good news because the doctor is telling him, hey, you don't have cancer.
Yeah.
But you don't feel that because Damani is yelling at him and putting something in the fish tank.
As humans, we're not built to deal with that. There's a reason stress makes you sick and stress shortens your life. We're not built to deal with it.
So don't watch the movie if you want a long and happy life.
We're not built to deal with 12 conflicts at once.
No. So how does that relate then to actually making a film? Like, what are our takeaways for this, Kat?
I think my biggest takeaway for this, and this is honestly something I don't put in my writing that I want to do from now on, is to have multiple things happening in a scene. I think I definitely lean more towards like these two characters are having this moment and following their conversations. But after this, I think, it's really interesting to have the multiple things going on at once and that feels scarier and more realistic. Yeah, also bad decisions and justifying the bad decisions.
Yeah. As long as characters have an internal logic that makes sense to the character, like you can have characters making dumb decisions.
Yeah, as long as it doesn't feel plotty.
Yeah.
As long as it feels character-based, while also keeping the protagonist likable. So I do a lot of script editing and script consulting work. I see that a lot of people try to do this film, and the reason I don't think any of the drafts I've seen work is they often have like an unlikable protagonist. Well, I wouldn't say how it's likable, but he's not awful.
He's quite charismatic. Like there are things about him that you can choose to relate to him, and not everyone does. Like my wife didn't. You know, but yeah, like he is a salesman. He knows how to talk. Like
he tries to be a good dad. He's not, but he tries.
Terrible.
Yeah, and then I also think a really good lesson from this is that part of that conflict comes because everyone has their own agenda. And I see a lot of like in early scripts or like first-time scripts, all the side characters are just there to serve the protagonist. Yeah. There's none of this. Everyone is out for themselves and getting what they want, and what they want to them is the most important thing. Yeah. So I think that was a really big takeaway from this film.
And it's when you can have your characters doing that and all of them wanting something in opposition to your main character that you can get a really intense sort of, like talking about the scene that we were talking about, right? Like that feels like it could be a climax scene, and yet it's not the climax of the film. It's
halfway through.
Yeah.
It only gets worse from there. This isn't easy to do.
No.
Like, I actually had in my room, I think, if anyone has ever seen a movie called The Room, I actually think, not Room with Brie Larson, The Room, it's Tommy Wiseau. I actually think this is what The Room was trying to do. To have all these multiple conflicts come in and all these characters putting stresses on the main character. I have the line, I definitely have breast cancer in there. Because I almost feel like that's meant to be like the equivalent of like the Michael Jackson pendant. Yeah. Just one more stressful plot line. If you want to go see how this is not done well, go watch The Room.
Don't watch it alone.
Don't watch it alone. Watch it in a group of people.
Yeah.
Preferably with at least one or two people who have seen it before.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was just a little comparison I had in my head of the bad version of this movie.
Yeah, I can see where you go that way. I think for my takeaways, and actually I'm putting this into effect at the moment as we speak, I probably took away the technical side of things, especially around the cinematography. I was really impressed by how much they could do with just keeping the film in a lot of close-ups. And so I've got a script that I'm working on at the moment, which is basically styled to be quite similar to this. And really wanting to explore that sort of just approach to cinematography where we can follow people into locations, but otherwise it's sort of in close-ups, handheld, or like sort of struggling to follow people. But yeah, there's some really great stuff to learn from the cinematography and just analyzing how they shoot the different scenes. So
yeah, look, it's probably a film I will revisit at some point in the future.
Yeah, I think I'm done for a little while.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of movie.
It's a lot of movie. It's a lot of very good movie. If you haven't, it's also worth checking out the Safdie brothers' previous film, Good Time, with Robert Pattinson.
Good movie.
I would say this is the better version of that one, but that's still quite a good film. Again, a sort of character who's not typically likable, who makes a lot of not great decisions, but sort of still that thrill ride.
Both are on Netflix.
Yeah.
Who don't sponsor us.
No. But if they want to,
yeah,
you know, we're...
Producers at Netflix who are definitely listening, give us a call.
That was our episode on Uncut Gems and how to stress out your audience. If you like the episode and want to hear more, make sure to hit the subscribe button and click the bell to receive notifications. We've got upcoming episodes on films and TV shows like Schitt's Creek, Middleditch and Schwartz, and The Matrix. Thanks for listening, and until next time, this has been Kill the Cat.
There are a lot of people listening to our podcast. It's great. I love it.
So many. And definitely the Safdie brothers.
Yeah. They're going to learn a lot that they
definitely
didn't already know.
They totally did this completely by accident. They're really going to enjoy our breakdown of their film that took 160 scripts. Yeah.